You bring those three things together and you really get the best chance at finding cancer early with high sensitivity and specificity.
In the screening world, right, there's these kind of things like the GRAIL multi-cancer detection test. There's a whole bunch of blood tests, right, associated with this. And you've obviously focused at Ezra on imaging. Can you talk a little bit about the maybe pros and cons of both? How do you think these two technologies interact with each other?
Yeah, I've thought long and hard about this. And actually, when I started Ezra, my goal was not to build an MRI imaging company. My goal was to help people find cancer early. And I spent almost a couple of years doing research and went through a dozen ideas on how you could solve the problem. And the first idea was actually liquid biopsies. This is ctDNA. This is 2016. This is before GRAIL launched. And I met with a genomics expert at Caltech and was like, here's what I'm thinking, liquid biopsies for early cancer detection and so on. And he was like, Emi, he sat me down and was like, I'm here to dissuade you from going this path. It's going to take us a decade to prove it, but we're going to see in a decade that sensitivity for early stage cancer detection using liquid biopsies is always going to be too low because you don't have enough DNA in the bloodstream originating from the tumor to be able to actually get high sensitivity. As a result, you look at GRAIL now, and for stage 1 cancer, they have a 16% sensitivity. So you have an 84% false negative rate at early stage. Not really conducive with early detection of cancer. Now, that's improving, and some of their organs they cover have higher sensitivity, and even though they have very low sensitivity, they have very high specificity. So I think there's value in GRAIL and liquid biopsies and so on. However, I think the ideal screening protocol is one in which you combine imaging, you combine liquid biopsies, and you combine kind of protein biomarkers, so like a PSA blood test and so on. And you bring those three things together and you really get the best chance at finding cancer early with high sensitivity and specificity. And actually, that's exactly what we do at Function Plus Ezra now. We do labs, we do scans, and we're the largest referrer of GRAIL test as an add-on through Function. And so kind of we're bringing these three things together, creating the best cancer screening protocol.
So it's what my team knows is my favorite strategy for everything, which is we should just do everything. Like when they're like, should we go A or B? I'm like, well, we have to do both, right?
Yes.
So thinking about this now on the imaging side, so one of the things I've heard that is scary for people is to let's get a signal and then not be able to find it or do anything about it. So imagine getting like a ctDNA test that says you have cancer, and then you go for, the diagnostic workup afterwards, and nobody can really tell you for sure if you have or don't. And so this is just like creates a huge amount of anxiety for people. Then on the other side of the problem. And so, we always hear about that as like, well, don't test for things you don't want to know about, right? Or you can't do anything about. And so do you get that kind of sentiment in your communities who work with you, or?
I mean, it's why imaging and liquid biopsies work so well together, right? Because you get a signal from a GRAIL test that you might have cancer, and you pair that with the full body scan that's going to see the tumor. And it's kind of like the ideal protocol. With Ezra, we get the reverse of that. We get, you're going to do these scans and you're going to find all of these things and you're going to have to follow up with all of these things. And that's a bit of a kind of, the people who say that have not thought about the problem long and hard enough, because you don't go from screening exam to biopsy or surgery. You go from screening exam to diagnostic exam to potentially biopsy to then surgery. Mammogram is a great example. You do breast screening mammogram. Then if you have a positive finding, you get a diagnostic mammogram, you get an ultrasound, you get a breast MRI, then you get a biopsy, then you get treated. And so in reality, most of the findings in a full body MRI, you're not going to follow up on. You're just going to have implicit follow up by just doing a longitudinal MRI scan every year. And then only for the findings that are likely or very likely to be cancer do you then go and do a follow-up. But the follow-up will always be a diagnostic scan. And for most people, that's where it will stop, because the diagnostic scan will rule in or rule out disease. And so we are starting to see internally data that like false positives are like a non-issue if you do full body scans correctly. And at one point, we'll be ready to publish some of that data.
And I assume you can find or your AI is identifying very early stage cancer, right? In
very, very early stage. Yes. And the benefit of using AI, for example, for prostate is that you have the ability to track lesions over time very minutely. So you can segment a lesion and monitor its progression over time. It will help you determine whether the lesion is benign or malignant, because a benign lesion will just stay the same. A malignant lesion will grow. And so if you are able to longitudinally monitor these lesions super accurately, it helps actually figure out which ones are problematic and which ones aren't.